Ethan Cole walked down the narrow metal corridor of the ship with slow steps. The night lights glowed faint blue, and most of the crew were asleep. He was tired, but his mind was awake. He carried a small case in his hand, hiding it close to his chest. Inside the case was something he had worked on for months, something he told no one about. He reached his room, a quiet place near the lower deck. The door slid open and he stepped in. The room was simple, a table, a chair, and tools scattered across the surface. He placed the case on the table and opened it carefully. Inside was a half-finished device, made of wires, glass, and metal parts. It looked broken, but in truth it was more powerful than any weapon on the ship. Ethan had built it not to harm, but to protect. He sat down and began to work with calm hands. Every sound in the quiet night seemed louder than usual. The humming of the ship engines, the soft creak of metal walls, and the steady beat of his own heart. Then the door slid open again. Ethan froze for a moment, his eyes turning quickly. He thought he had locked it. A girl stood in the doorway. She wore the plain dress of the Queen's servant. Her name was Claire Davis. She had only meant to deliver a message, but she had opened the wrong door by mistake. When she saw Ethan and the strange device glowing faintly on the table, her body froze. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Ethan rose slowly, holding his hands out, showing no threat. "Claire," he said softly, "you should not be here." Her eyes stayed on the device. She had never seen anything like it. Wires lit like veins of light, small sparks running across glass tubes. What is that?" she whispered. "It is not what you think," Ethan said. He stepped closer, trying to calm her. "This is not a weapon. I built it for protection, for Her Majesty." Claire blinked. She served Queen Margaret every day, bringing her water, arranging her robes, standing silent in the background. But she had never heard of something like this. "You are hiding it," she said slowly. "If it was for the Queen, why is it not known?" Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment. "Because the Council would stop me. They fear change. They fear anything they cannot control. But I know there are enemies on this ship, and I will not watch the Queen fall." Claire's heart beat fast. She had walked in by mistake, but now she was holding a secret that could end a life. If she told the guards, Ethan could be arrested for treason. If she kept silent, she would carry a weight heavier than she had ever known. "You should not trust me," she said. "I could go to them now." Ethan looked at her, his face calm but his voice strong. "If you do, I will not fight you. But if you listen, you will understand. This is not about me. This is about saving her." The silence stretched. Claire's hands trembled at her sides. She had always thought of herself as weak, a simple girl who carried trays and bowed her head. Yet in this moment, her choice mattered more than anything she had ever done. Her eyes moved again to the device. She could not understand how it worked, but she could feel the meaning behind Ethan's words. There was no anger in him, only resolve. Finally, she spoke. Then explain it to me. Tell me why you risk this. Ethan gave a slow nod, his shoulders relaxing a little. He gestured for her to sit. She walked inside, closing the door behind her. The sound of the lock echoed louder than she expected. For the first time since he began building the device, Ethan was no longer alone. And Claire, though she had entered by mistake, knew she had stepped into something that would change her life forever.
Claire sat at the small table, her hands resting stiffly in her lap. She watched as Ethan moved his tools around the glowing device. His movements were calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Started this months ago," Ethan said quietly. "The Queen trusts her guards, but I have seen things she has not. Shadows in the corridors. Messages that should not exist. There are men on this ship who want her crown. They wait for the right moment." Claire frowned, trying to take in his words. She had heard whispers in the servant halls, hushed voices that spoke of unrest, but she had never thought them real. "And this," she said, pointing to the strange device, "will stop them." Ethan nodded. "It is a shield. Not one made of steel, but of energy. When finished, it will form a barrier that no blade, no bullet, and no blast can break. If they strike, the Queen will stand safe." Claire stared at the wires, the tubes, the faint light. It looked fragile, as if a small shake could break it apart, yet Ethan spoke of it with unshaken faith. "If the Council knew," she whispered, "they would call you a traitor." "I know," Ethan answered. "But sometimes loyalty is not about obeying every order. Sometimes loyalty is about doing what no one else dares." She looked at him, seeing not only a worker, but a man carrying a heavy weight. He could have kept silent, yet he had chosen to act. The room grew still. Outside, the ship's engines hummed on, carrying them through endless stars. Claire's mind turned fast. If she betrayed him, the Queen might never learn of this shield, and the danger would remain. If she kept silent, she risked being tied to him, sharing in his fate if he was caught. "Why tell me?" she asked at last. "You could have sent me away." Ethan gave her a small, tired smile. "Because you already saw. And because I believe you will choose wisely. You are closer to the Queen than anyone else. You know her heart. You know she deserves protection." Claire lowered her eyes. She thought of Queen Margaret, a woman who ruled with dignity, who often spoke kindly to her servants. Claire remembered the gentle hand that once rested on her shoulder after a long day. A small gesture of warmth from a queen to a girl who felt invisible. "I will not betray you," Claire said softly. "But I do not know if I am strong enough to help you." Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady. "Strength is not always in the hands. Sometimes it is in the choice you make." Her breath shook, but she nodded. The door suddenly buzzed. Someone was outside. Both Ethan and Claire looked at each other in silence. Ethan quickly covered the device with a cloth, sweeping tools into a box. Claire stood up, her heart pounding. The door slid open, and Lucas, another servant, stepped in. He was tall, sharp-eyed, and known for listening more than he spoke. "Claire," he said slowly, "I was looking for you. The Queen asked for her robe, and you never came." Claire forced a smile, hiding the tremor in her voice. "I must have lost track of time. I was only passing by." Lucas's eyes moved to the table. He saw the cloth, the faint light leaking from beneath it. Suspicion flickered in his gaze, but he said nothing. "Be careful where you wander," he said, his tone low. "Some doors are not meant to open." Then he turned and left. The door closed, and silence filled the room again. Claire pressed her hand to her chest, her heart racing. Ethan looked at her, his jaw set. "He suspects," Ethan said. "We must be careful." Claire nodded, fear settling heavy in her stomach. She had taken a step into a world of secrets, and now there was no way back. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We finish," Ethan replied firmly. "And when the time comes, we stand by the Queen, no matter what it costs." Claire looked at him, her fear mixing with a strange sense of courage she had never known before. She had started the night as a simple servant. Now she was part of something far greater. As the stars passed silently beyond the ship's windows, 2 lives had been bound together by a secret that could decide the fate of a queen. The great hall of the ship was alive with voices. Noblemen and guards moved across the floor, their boots echoing against polished steel. Queen Margaret sat on her high seat, her eyes calm but sharp. She wore a robe of deep blue, her crown simple yet firm on her head. Listened to the council speak of supplies, of travel routes, of the safety of the fleet. But behind their words, she felt the weight of something unspoken. Claire stood behind the queen, silent as always. She held the edge of the robe, her head bowed, yet her eyes drifted across the hall. She saw Lucas speaking quietly with 2 men in dark coats. Their voices were low, but their eyes kept glancing toward the queen. Claire felt her stomach twist. She remembered Ethan's words about danger, about men waiting for the right moment. After the council ended, Queen Margaret rose and left the hall. Claire followed, her steps quick, her heart heavy. She thought of telling the queen everything, of speaking of Ethan and the device. But fear stopped her tongue. What if the queen thought it was madness? What if the guards arrested Ethan before his work was done? That night, Claire returned to Ethan's room. The device glowed brighter now, its parts more complete. Sparks of light moved like streams of water across the glass tubes. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead, his hands never resting. "You saw something," Ethan said at once, reading her face. Claire nodded. Lucas was speaking with strangers. They watched Her Majesty. I felt it. They are not loyal. Ethan tightened his jaw. "Then we are running out of time." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "The queen is in danger sooner than you thought." He looked at her with steady eyes. "That is why we cannot fail." Claire watched him work, the glow of the device painting his face in pale light. She wished she had his strength, his certainty. Inside her, fear and loyalty fought like fire and water. Days passed, the air on the ship grew tense. Guards moved in pairs, whispers filled the servant halls, and the queen's eyes grew sharper each time she entered the council chamber. One evening, as Claire carried a tray through the corridors, Lucas stepped in front of her. His face held a smile, but his eyes were cold. "You spend much time on the lower decks," he said. "Strange, for someone with duties in the upper halls." Claire kept her voice even. "I go where I am needed." Lucas leaned closer. "Be careful, Claire. Secrets have a way of breaking those who keep them." She held his gaze for only a second before walking past. Her hands shook as she carried the tray, but she did not let it fall. Later, she told Ethan. He stood silent for a long time, then said, "He knows more than we thought. If he presses harder, he may uncover everything." Claire felt a shiver run through her. "Then what can we do?" "We finish before they strike," Ethan answered. "And if he comes for us, we stand together." The next morning, Queen Margaret held court again. Claire stood near, her eyes searching the faces of every man who entered. She saw Lucas at the edge of the room, watching not the queen, but her. The queen's voice filled the hall, strong and steady, but Claire could not hear the words. Her mind replayed Ethan's warning, Lucas's smile, the glow of the device. She felt the weight of the secret pressing harder each day. That night, she returned to Ethan. Do-do-do-do-do-do. The device was nearly whole. It hummed with a power that seemed alive. Do-do-do. "Once this is done," Ethan said, "the queen will be safe. But the moment I use it, they will know. They will come for me." Claire's throat tightened. "Then I will not let them take you." He looked at her, surprised. For the first time since they met, she spoke not as a frightened servant, but as someone who had chosen her side. Outside, the ship drifted through dark space, stars burning cold in the distance. Inside, in a small hidden room, 2 lives worked against time, carrying a secret that could mean the fall or the survival of a queen. And somewhere in the shadows, Lucas waited, his eyes sharp, his patience thin, ready to strike when the moment came. The alarms rang through the ship like thunder. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and the sound of rushing boots echoed everywhere. Claire dropped the tray she was carrying and ran toward the queen's chambers. She knew at once that the moment Ethan had warned her about had come. In the hall near the queen's door, guards fought against other guards. Some were loyal, some were traitors, and steel clashed against steel. Claire pressed herself to the wall, her heart pounding. She saw Lucas among the traitors, his face calm, his blade sharp. Gave orders with a cold voice. guiding men toward the Queen's chamber. She hurried inside, finding Queen Margaret standing tall, surrounded by a few loyal guards. The Queen's eyes met Claire's, steady and proud, even as chaos roared outside. "Your Majesty," Claire said, breathless. "They are coming for you. Ethan is ready. You must go." The Queen nodded once, her voice firm. "Take me to him." Together they moved through hidden passages that only servants knew. Claire led the way, guiding the Queen and her guards through narrow corridors, while the sounds of battle followed them. At the lower deck, Ethan stood waiting beside the glowing device. It was complete now, humming with power, a shield waiting to rise. Sweat covered his brow, but his eyes burned with focus.
Your Majesty.
Ethan said, bowing quickly. "There is no time. Stand near the device. When they strike, it will protect you." The Queen studied him for only a moment, then gave a small nod. She trusted him, even without words. Suddenly, the door burst open. Lucas stepped inside with armed men behind him. His smile was thin, his voice sharp. "So this is the secret," he said. "A servant and an engineer hiding their little light while the crown falls?" Claire stepped in front of the Queen, her hands shaking but her stance firm. "You will not touch her." Lucas laughed, but there was no joy in it. "You, Claire? You could not even lift a sword. Step aside before you break." Ethan moved closer to the device, his hand ready. "Take one more step, and you will see what loyalty can build." The traitors rushed forward. Ethan pressed the switch, and a wall of bright energy spread out like a rising wave. The first attackers struck it with blades, but the weapons bounced away as if striking stone. Bullets fired, but the shield held strong, sparks dancing where metal met light. The Queen stood safe inside the circle, her robe glowing in the strange light. Lucas's face darkened. "You cannot hide behind glass forever. When this power fails, you will all fall." Claire, though afraid, found her voice. "It will not fail. Not while we stand." The battle raged outside the shield. Loyal guards fought traitors, steel ringing and cries echoing through the chamber. Ethan kept his hand on the device, his body shaking from the strain of holding it. The energy hummed louder, the glow burning brighter. Lucas pressed closer, his eyes locked on Claire. "You chose wrong," he said. "You chose a doomed man and a dying queen." Claire met his stare. Fear filled her chest, but courage rose above it. "I chose honor, you chose betrayal." Lucas raised his blade and struck at the shield, but it flared with power, throwing him back against the wall. He rose, furious, but the Queen's guards rushed him. Steel met steel, and the clash filled the chamber. Ethan groaned, his strength weakening. Claire moved to his side, placing her hand on his arm. "Hold on," she whispered. "Do not stop." He gave a small nod, his eyes locked on the glowing device. Outside the shield, the traitors began to fall, their attack broken by the resistance of loyal men. Lucas fought hard, but even he began to lose ground. Finally, the clash ended. The chamber fell quiet except for the hum of the shield. Lucas lay defeated, his weapon taken, his eyes burning with rage. Ethan let out a long breath and lowered his hand. The shield dimmed, but did not break, standing strong around the Queen. The Queen stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "Betrayal has failed tonight. Loyalty has held." Claire stood beside her, her fear replaced with pride. She had not held a sword, but she had stood firm. And in that moment, she knew she was no longer only a servant. Ethan looked at her, his face weary but strong. Together, they had faced the storm, and together, they had protected the crown. The ship was quiet after the battle. The red lights faded, the alarms silenced, and the halls smelled of smoke and steel. The bodies of the traitors were carried away, their rebellion crushed. Loyal guards stood watch at every door, their faces hard but proud. In the lower deck chamber, Ethan sat on the floor beside the device, his body weak, but his eyes still alert. Claire knelt beside him, holding his hand as if to keep him steady. The Queen stood near, her robe torn but her crown still shining. She looked at them both with calm strength. "You risked everything," Queen Margaret said. "Without you I would be dead, and this ship would be in the hands of traitors." Ethan tried to bow, but his body ached too much. "I only did what had to be done, Your Majesty." The Queen stepped closer, placing her hand on his shoulder. You did more than that. You built a shield that saved not only me, but the crown itself. History will remember your courage. Her eyes then moved to Claire. And you, servant who could have run, who could have betrayed. Instead, you stood firm in the face of fear. You showed loyalty greater than any sword. Claire lowered her eyes, her cheeks warm. I only did what felt right, Your Majesty. I could not let them take you. The Queen smiled gently. Sometimes what feels right is the bravest choice of all. Days later, the ship gathered in the great hall. The nobles, the guards, and the servants filled the wide space, their voices hushed as the Queen entered. She stood tall, though the marks of the battle still lingered on her robe. Beside her walked Ethan and Claire. The crowd whispered, for many had heard rumors of what had happened, but now they would see the truth with their own eyes. The Queen raised her hand, and silence filled the hall. There was betrayal among us, she said, her voice strong and steady. There were those who wished to see the crown fall. But tonight, we honored those who stood against that darkness. She turned first to Ethan. Ethan Cole, who built with his hands what others feared to imagine. Who risked death to give his queen a shield of light. I name you protector of this fleet. Your place will not be hidden in shadows, but honored beside the throne. Applause filled the hall. Ethan bowed deeply, though his heart felt heavy with the weight of such words. The Queen then turned to Claire. And Claire Davis, a servant who showed the strength of a soldier. You chose loyalty when betrayal pressed close. You stood before your queen without a weapon, yet your courage was sharper than any blade. From this day forward, you shall be my handmaiden and my counsel, for I trust your voice and your heart. The hall erupted in cheers. Claire bowed low, her eyes shining with tears. She had entered that chamber as a simple servant, but she stood now as someone new, someone seen. Lucas and the other traitors were taken away, their names spoken with shame. The Queen declared that loyalty, not birth, would guide her rule. Those who had proven their hearts true, whether noble or servant, would stand in honor. Later, when the hall had emptied and the night had returned, Ethan and Claire stood together on the viewing deck. The stars stretched endless before them, silent and bright. Do you ever think, Claire asked softly, that none of this would have happened if I had not opened the wrong door? Ethan gave a tired smile. Perhaps, but maybe it was not wrong. Maybe it was the door meant to open. She laughed quietly, the sound soft against the hum of the ship. I was so afraid that night. I froze. I thought I was weak. You were never weak, Ethan said. You only needed a reason to see your strength. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars drift by. Behind them, the Queen carried on her rule, strong and wise. The ship sailed on, safe for now, guarded not only by shields of energy, but by hearts of courage. Claire thought of the night she first saw the device, glowing faintly on Ethan's table. She thought of the choice she made to keep his secret, a choice that had changed everything. And she knew deep inside that history would not only remember the Queen, but also the quiet ones who stood when it mattered most.